Good afternoon, everybody. Another beautiful day in Alberta. A little bit of landscape for you guys, some hills and some trees and some snows for the city slickers that never get to get out and enjoy the beautiful scenery of Alberta. So I got a story for you. I went into town today, into the big city, and I'm not a city person. I like the nice open areas of our prairies, and but it wasn't too bad. It was very busy, very congested. So many extremely nice people, obviously. But I did run into a couple of people that were just a little on the negative side. So I'm walking down the street and I come up to these two guys and a girl that were sitting on the bench. And they were smiling and laughing and seemed to be having a good time, be in a good mood and everything. So, of course, I said, "Hey, good morning. How you guys doing?" And they replied with a "Good morning. We're great. How about yourself?" Typical good mornings. But as I was started replying and talking about how beautiful the day was, I noticed that the one guy was just staring at my sweater. And of course, I'm wearing this white Independence sweater. So don't stop watching now. It's a good story. Just because it's an Independence sweater, I know a lot of people don't agree with this, but this is where this whole conversation is going. So I asked him, it's like, is everything okay? I noticed that you were just sitting there staring at my sweater and you look upset. And he says, no. He says, I'm not upset. I'm more disgusted than I'm upset. He told me that he's been hearing nothing but independence movement and everywhere he goes. He said that he just doesn't understand why everybody wants to tear up the province and split the country apart, and he doesn't understand why anybody would want to do that. So I told him I do understand. I understand his point. I said, but there's a lot of negative perspectives out there right now. I said, but the problem is that most people that are negative about the topic, they don't really have the knowledge on it. They're watching mainstream media and very misinformed. Now, even though the gentleman was, what seemed to be very confrontational at first, he said, okay. He says, if everyone's so wrong and misinformed, tell me why. He said, everybody that he talks to about this movement always says that people are misinformed, right? So he says, tell me why. And just as he finishes that, the lady that was there, she got very mad. She stood up and she started getting very loud, and she's telling me, she's like, how everyone is broke and no one can afford groceries. Taxes are way too high. She has to do her taxes soon and still owes money from last year, and she can't afford her bills every month, let alone the food and the outstanding taxes. So she's said, for F's sakes, she says, my father was waiting for surgery for 3 years. He wasn't able to work and he was denied benefits from the government. Both her mom and her worked the whole time, but between the two incomes, they still couldn't get by. They weren't able to make the enough money, to make the basic needs, right? They lost their house that she had been born in. This girl was, late teens, early 20s, I'm guessing. But she was born there and her mom and dad had separated. She told me that if Alberta separates, things will be so much worse than they are now. We'll lose everything the Canadian government gives us. The food prices will go even higher. The gas will go up. We will even have a tax increase and service charges on everything in order to pay for healthcare and the hospitals and unemployment, and even the vehicle insurance will go up. Now, folks, this is one of those times when I could have said, I'm sorry you guys are feeling this way, have a great day, and left, right? I could have done that. But honestly, if we were to do that every single time, right, it's not going to change anything, will it? So I explained to this young lady that I completely understand her, that I too was off work for 2 years waiting on surgery. I also had issues getting any assistance on that note, I still respectfully disagreed on a few things with her. I explained how if we were to separate, it would open up so much for Alberta, right? And we went through the taxes being decreased. We went through no more federal tax, so all the money that stays in their pockets from the taxes that they would normally dish out, 50% or 40% out of the wages every check. That we would stop transfer payments. So the $20 to $25 billion every year would cover the cost of hospitals, healthcare upgrades, because we already pay as a province for all of this. It's not covered by the federal government. And yes, our healthcare system does need work, obviously, right? We need more doctors. We need all this kind of stuff. So we need doctors, nurses. We need to be able to push guys. We need to be able to push people out of these beds, in and out of these beds for surgeries and stuff like that as much as possible, as fast as we possibly can. We went through how food prices would also be much easier to afford because of the no GST, the taxes would be much lower, more money kept in their paycheck, everything would be much easier to afford. We discussed how the Alberta would have their own insurance programs, more money going into the system and less people to look after. So not only would there be a better insurance for those people, but we could actually be able to attract, those more healthcare professionals. So our waiting times would be much lower, and we could afford to do both private and government health system. And this would be a positive thing. The people that can't afford to pay for it themselves are suffering as much as everybody else. They can't get in to get their operations done. So if we're freeing up some beds where the people that can't afford to pay for it and they're willing to pay for it to get it done faster, and they do that, well, it's just freeing up more beds for everybody else. I think that this is a really good thing, honestly, to have both systems in place. And the last thing that we talked about was that Alberta doesn't own this land. We can not separate. We would have to leave if the people are not happy. And this was brought up to my attention by the other young man that was there. He was a young native gentleman, right? So I asked the young man, it's like, okay, well, if Alberta doesn't own the land, who does, right? And of course, he told me his people do. It's all treaty land. Everyone knows this. And I asked, it's like, are you sure about this? Like, who told you this, right? He said, they were here first. The white people come and they locked them all up and, on the reserves, and they flooded them with alcohol and drugs to keep them down for the rest of their lives. And now they have to fight with the government for everything, and they still get nothing. Now and again, at this time, I could have walked away from the conversation. Instead, I explained how the treaties were formed, when they were formed. I said it was in a contract written and agreed to by both the government and its people way back in the early to mid 1800s. And this is why the reserve land exists, and all the bands and each member receive lots of money throughout their lives, right? We went through how the food prices would be. We went through how the drinking water, nobody had clean drinking water, and the housing on the reserves, the schooling, the health care, everything else that really any person is concerned with, right? So I pulled out the phone and I pulled up Google, and I Googled Treaty 6, 7, and 8 in Alberta, right? Anybody can do this, right? So I showed them the treaties and what they had said. And we went through 6, 7, and 8, and they're virtually the same, right? So it shows there that the land was ceded in the 1800s, right? It explains clearly that the land was ceded or sold, and it has a few words stating, forever, right? Explaining it's got five different words explain the exact same thing. And it's forever, right? That's it. That's all. It's clean, cut, and dry as far as I'm concerned, right? And as far as legal law states, that's what it is. So I'm not sure where all this confusion is coming from. Why they all say that no, it's still their land, it's this and that. So that means that they don't own the land, right? Alberta does. They sold it to the federal government in the 90s. The land was transferred from federal to provincial. It was transferred from our federal government to Alberta, and this included all the oil and mineral rights. And he read this for himself. He was quiet, but he seemed to have his eyes opened a little bit. And so I explained the three options that they would have if Alberta was successful, right? And I told them that this could be way better for them. They could renegotiate a contract that was written, in the 1800s, right? So much has changed now. It's just incredible. They could renegotiate a contract with Alberta and fall under the new country of Alberta, or they would be able to stay with Canada and nothing would change. The federal land would still be owned by the government. Like the reserve land would still be owned by the government, and nothing would change in that part. They could still stay under the exact same contract that they've always had, right? But they'd be able to choose this for themselves, right? Either stay under the same contract, leave Canada, renegotiate with Alberta, or whatever, right? They'd have the three different options. So, and folks, I have to say, for a long time, like, this was the best encounter that I've had. It was a great day, right? I wasn't sure what was going to happen when the conversation first started. They were a younger group, younger than me. They were a younger group, and it started out a little confrontational, I guess, but by the time we were all done, we were kind of laughing and joking, and everybody was smiling again, and it seemed like they had a little bit more of an understanding. And I tell you, they did. They thanked me, actually. They thanked me for pulling up the treaties and having a look at it and everything else. I still don't think that they were quite convinced that those documents are real. But, I hope that their eyes were open enough that they can go home and they'll start researching this stuff for themselves, right? No matter what they were told as they were growing up and stuff like that, it's written there. The contracts are right there. Anybody can see them. You can Google it. Google Treaty 6, 7, and 8. Read through the whole things. They're very short. It'll be good. But so yeah, day's kind of getting away from me here. But I just want to say, like, if you have a chance to have a conversation with anyone, about any of the topics, really, like, it doesn't have to be this whole independence thing. This one had to do with the independence, but look at all the protests and stuff that are going on, right? The world is crazy, right? You got most of them are not civil right now. There's a lot of chaos in the streets, and maybe having some of these conversations with the other side, just maybe we can keep a few people out of the crowds and safe at home with their families, right? Like I said, I'm pleased to have this encounter today. I'm even happier to be out of the city and back to my happy place, back in the wide open plains and the snow and the cold and the trees, and this is where I belong. I'm not a city guy at all. But thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks to the new subscribers. It's greatly appreciated. This is a new adventure for me. There'll be a lot more content coming out. Like I said, the page is or the group is very new. The page isn't new. I've had the YouTube for quite a while. It's been a couple of years, but yeah, the page has just kind of been restarted, I guess, and kind of trying to give it a new life. So, welcome to Prairies to Paradise, and please like and share and subscribe. And I hope you enjoyed the landscape, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much. Have a great day.